Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Public Assistance Time Extension Request webinar. Today, we will be covering time extension request and the Grants Manager Grants Portal functionality. This functionality was implemented into the system some time ago. However, with EMMIE, it has not always been fully utilized. Now that EMMIE is getting decommissioned, it is important to ensure that all time extension procedures are being done within the system. Events declared on or after January 15th, 2024 are no longer using EMMIE. These newer events have everything built into the system all the way through obligation and closeout. For events prior to January 15th, 2024, FEMA is working with regions to migrate their events fully into Grants Manager and Grants Portal over the next coming months. Right now, EMMIE is set to be decommissioned sometime later in the year of 2024. This is why it is so important to start completing this functionality within the systems. When the older events start to get migrated, it is much easier when EMMIE and Grants Manager Grants Portal match. For your reference, you can find a copy of these slides in the Grants Manager Grants Portal Support Center under either Job Aids in Grants Manager or Resources in Grants Portal, and then the Training Materials and Tutorials folder. Scroll all the way down to Presentation Slides, and they are attached in that folder. There are screenshots in the presentation slides that will show you step-by-step processes that we will be demonstrating throughout this presentation. Over to you.
So for the agenda for today, we will cover the time extension requests, the roles and responsibilities within Grants Manager and Grants Portal, as well as the Grants Manager and Grants Portal functionality. We'll talk about the work completion deadlines. We'll get into the authority, roles, and responsibilities. And with these authority, roles, and responsibilities, it will be between what the roles and responsibilities are with FEMA, what the roles and responsibilities are between the recipient and also the applicant. We'll be discussing the termination memo process. And please note with the determination memo process, we'll be going over the termination memo process only for time extension requests. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll be giving out resources. Common terminology that you'll see through this presentation will be the period of performance and also the activity completion deadline. The period of performance in the PA Program and Policy Guide, also known as a PAPA-G, the period of performance refers to the total amount of time during which FEMA authorizes a grantee to complete the approved work of the project. The activity completion deadline, as we see, it's on the same line as the period of performance. And what the activity completion deadline is it's the terminology used in Grants Manager and Grants Portal system that states the regulatory deadline that a grantee needs to have the work completed for a project. And as I stated before, they're on the same line. These are both the same things. In the PAPA-G, you'll see it referred to as the period of performance. And in Grants Manager, Grants Portal, you'll see it referred to as the activity completion deadline. Time extension requests. Time extension request is a written request submitted to request more time for a grantee to complete the work associated with the project. Grants Manager, commonly known as GM, is a system used by FEMA and the federal contractors supporting the PA mission and to manage grant applications and projects. It is used to assign and track actions, collect information and documents, and conduct pre-award activities and soon-to-be post-award activities. Grants Portal, also known as GP, is a mirror system of Grants Manager. A Grants Portal is the same as Grants Manager, except it is used by external SLTT partners. This will be our applicants and our recipients. And they're able to perform the same thing. They're able to track actions, collect information and documents, and conduct pre-award activities as well in Grants Portal. Emergency Management Mission Integration Environment, also known as EMMIE, the establishment of Grants Manager and Grants Portal as a processing system for all new PA grants has reduced the role of its predecessor, EMMIE. When all remaining EMMIE functions are moved to Grants Manager and Grants Portal in the near future, EMMIE will be sunsetted and Grants Manager and Grants Portal will become the official system of record. Currently, EMMIE remains as official system of record for obligations for events that have not been migrated over. Regulatory project deadlines. FEMA only provides public assistance for funding for work that is completed and costs incurred within the regulatory deadline as stated on this chart in the slide. Regulatory deadline comes from the Code of Federal Regulations, 44 CFR, Section 206.204, Subpart G, under the Project Performance section. The deadline for emergency work is 6 months from the declaration date, and the deadline for permanent work is 18 months from the declaration date. Per 44 CFR, the recipient has the authority to extend deadlines for individual projects based on extenuating circumstances. The recipient can extend project work completion deadlines for emergency work for up to an additional 6 months, and for permanent work, an additional 30 months. There are some exceptions. For example, with non-congregate sheltering, the applicant is required to seek time extension requests every 30 days after the initial 30 days of the non-congregate sheltering operations. Project deadlines. FEMA only provides funding for work that is completed within the regulatory deadlines. If the applicant needs more time to complete the work, they must submit a request in writing with justification for why the project needs more time. In the project time extension request, the applicant will want to provide how was the delay beyond the applicant's control. And I will get more into that in the upcoming slides. Also, the applicant will want to provide any justification for the delay. The other thing that the applicant will want to provide is the status of the project work. How much work is completed and how much work still needs to be completed. Also, what is the project timeline and the projected date of completion? There's a table in the Papa G that I will cover and go more into details in the upcoming slides. Reference is a Papa G version 4. Please use the Papa G version that was in place at the time of the declared event. If you're working an event that uses an older version of the Papa G, please make sure to use that version of the Papa G. FEMA's authority and time extension requests. When the applicant or recipient provides justification to FEMA, a written time extension request, the justification and additional time needed to complete the project, FEMA will review, and if the extenuating circumstances are deemed beyond the applicant's control, FEMA leadership can approve additional time. Time extension requests outside of the recipient's authority must be submitted by the recipient to the FEMA regional administrator. Extenuating circumstances. FEMA generally considers some of the following to be extenuating circumstances beyond the applicant's control. Permitting or environmental and historic preservation compliance delays due to other agencies involved. Environmental limitation, such as a short construction window. Also, environmental limitations can also be any breeding seasons, nesting seasons, inclement weather, site access, prohibit or advise impact on construction, lack of availability of materials, equipment, or contractors to complete work, magnitude of event. And these extenuating circumstances are some of the most common circumstances that we may see in the field. May not be considered extenuating circumstance. Let's review some of the circumstances that may not be supported at time extension requests. FEMA generally considers the following to be circumstances within the applicant's control and not justifiable for a time extension request. Permitting or environmental delays due to applicant delays in requesting permits. Lack of funding, change in administration or cost accounting system, any issues with cost documents. Most of the time extension requests that were denied by FEMA, it was because there was not enough justification about how the extenuating circumstance was beyond the applicant's control. When writing a time extension request, make sure you include as many details as possible. How to request and time extension. At the slide here, if we look at the PowerPoint, at the bottom we see applicant, recipient, FEMA. That is a process of how to request the time extension request. This process will be done in Grants Portal. The applicant will draft the time extension request with justification, including any supporting information and documentation. The applicant will upload the time extension request at the project level with proper naming conventions. Then the requests for activity completion deadlines, it will be done in Grants Portal. The request should be submitted prior to the current approved activity completion deadline. If you know that a project is not going to make that activity completion deadline, the request should be submitted prior to that. You should be having conversations with your leadership, with any FEMA leadership, with your program delivery manager that it requires a time extension request. If the request is beyond the recipient's authorized extension, the recipient will make their recommendation and submit the request to FEMA. Information to support the time extension request. The time extension request should be submitted prior to the current approved deadline. Be specific to one project. The time extension request should include dates and any provisions of all previous extensions. If there are previous time extension requests, it is helpful to include the work that has been completed and the project progress since the previous approved time extension request. Construction timeline. The project should have any schedules in there. If you have any information regarding what the completion date may be, you should include this in the time extension request. Time extension request should also include some of the following. It should be delays in any obtaining permits. If you're waiting on any outside agencies, you should also include the permits and agency involved, any application dates, environmental delays, limitations, endangered nestings or breeding season. This may also come in correspondence with various agencies. If you're a various agency, if an outside agency, environmental agency told you that you're not able to start the work due to breeding season, you could upload these correspondence in Grants portal with the time extension requests. If there's any inclement weather, severe weather conditions that prohibit access to the area or impacts construction, or any other reasons for delays. And this is why we said before that it has to be done prior to the approved activity completion deadline. Start having these conversations with your leadership, with your program delivery manager, what the other reasons for delay may be, because we want to make sure that it is an extenuating circumstance. Incomplete work. FEMA only provides funding for work that is performed within the approved period of performance. The approved scope of work must be completed for funding to be eligible. If there are any changes to the approved scope of work, the applicant must submit a scope of work change prior to the work being started. If the project is not complete, FEMA de-obligates the funds for that project. If the applicant only completes part of the approved scope of work, and there's a distinction between the completed work and then uncompleted work, then FEMA only de-obligates funding for the uncompleted work. Here on this slide, we have an example. Let's say a project includes 3 buildings, and the scope of work is for 3 of the facilities, and the applicant only restores 2 of those 3 facilities. FEMA will only de-obligate the funds that the applicant did not restore. So the example on this slide, we have 2 buildings that are complete, and the next building is not complete. So FEMA will de-obligate the funds for that 3rd building that is not complete. Temporary facilities. Depending on the extent of damage to the facility, the applicant may be unable to restore the facility to its pre-disaster design and function within 6 months. Normally, the recipient has the authority to extend the deadline for emergency work up to 6 months. However, for temporary facilities, only FEMA has the authority to approve any time extension requests to the project deadline. FEMA considers the time frame necessary to restore the damaged facility when evaluating the time extension requests for temporary facilities. If the applicant requests funding for a temporary facility and knows at that time that the restoration of the original facility will exceed 6 months, FEMA may approve additional time and funding up to 12 months. If the applicant needs additional time beyond this 12-month deadline, the applicant must submit a written time extension request that includes the status of work and a timeline for completion. FEMA only provides additional time if the applicant begins construction on the damaged facility within 12 months of the declaration date, unless the circumstances beyond the applicant's control and prevented the start of construction within this 12-month time frame. Fixed cost offer. The applicant has up to 18 months from the disaster declaration date to accept a fixed cost offer for each project. If the applicant is requesting hazard mitigation funding, the applicant must determine the actual scope of work and the hazard mitigation measures to be performed within the 30-day and 18-month deadline. Each time FEMA transmits a fixed cost offer, The recipient and applicant have a combined total of 30 calendar days from the date of FEMA's transmission of the fixed cost offer to accept the offer, not to exceed 18-month deadline. FEMA processes projects without accepted fixed cost offers by the 30-day and 18-month deadline, using standard public assistance policies and procedures, and adjusts funding based on actual eligible costs at closeout. Time extensions to accept fixed cost offers must be approved by FEMA's Assistant Administrator for Recovery. Prime award, event period of performance. On this slide, it shows recipient, picture of recipient, and then FEMA. This process will be between the recipient and FEMA for the event period of performance. The prime award or the event period of performance starts on the first day of the incident period and extends 4 years from the declaration date. Project extensions cannot exceed the event period of performance. It was 4 years from the declaration date. It cannot exceed that event period of performance for project extensions. The recipient must request FEMA approval for an extension to the event period of performance if they anticipate project work to extend beyond the end of the event period of performance. Resource to event period of performance, Papa G version 4. FEMA rejecting a time extension request. As I spoke about before, we want to make sure that we're doing a time extension request prior to the deadline. We want to make sure that we're having these conversations with leadership, with our program delivery manager. We want to make sure that we're telling them what the extenuating circumstances is and that we're very detailed in our documentation. But this is a screenshot of FEMA rejecting a time extension request. When the time extension request gets rejected, it will be a complete eligibility determination memo for the time extension request, not the full project. The determination categories will be late submission. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that we're doing it prior to the activity completion deadline. No RFI response, reasonable time, work completed. Costs will be added. The eligibility issue will be explained, and laws and regulations and policies will be listed in that termination memo. Time extension request approval process. So here's a summary of what I just covered. All these steps will be completed in Grants Portal, and for FEMA, our steps will be completed in Grants Manager. So the first step of the time extension request will be the applicant will request extension to the activity completion deadline. Any time extension request letter or supporting documents should be uploaded to the project level in Grants Portal. After that, the recipient will review, and if in agreement, they can approve or reject the applicant's time extension request. If they approve the recipient, they'll like to add any documentation or justification to support their recommendation for approval. They're able to do that in Grants Portal as well. Then after the recipient, it goes to FEMA review, and then FEMA will review the time extension request and approve or reject it in Grants Manager. If FEMA approves the time extension request, from there you'll see approval and you'll see a change to activity completion deadline in Grants Portal. If FEMA rejects the time extension request, that will start the determination memo, the DM process. If FEMA will submit a formal response with the explanation of why it is denied and upload the response in Grants Manager and EMMIE, and it will be in Grants Portal as well. Once the determination memo is issued in Grants Manager, the applicant will have 60 days to appeal this decision. Common issues with time extension requests. We usually see incorrect descriptions or categories added when uploading the documents. So make sure that you're looking over the documents for time extension requests. Make sure you're uploading it to the correct project. Make sure you're detailed in that time extension request letter. The time extension requests can be requested in Grants Portal without uploading documentation or a letter. However, if there's not enough information to support the reasoning for a time extension request, this could result in delays for approving the extension or no. You just have to think about a time extension request as a two-part process. The applicant will upload the time extension request letter, and then they will complete the functionality in Grants Portal. You have to put all the details in that time extension request letter. Also, another common issue is just putting descriptions in the text box, which makes it harder to track and review. It is best to formally request the time extension request letter with all necessary justification and supporting information. Another common issue is the extension cannot be requested past the prime award deadline. Talked about the event period of performance, which is 4 years from the event declaration. If the extension is needed beyond this prime award, the recipient will have to make a request to FEMA for the prime award deadline extension. Best practices. Our best practices for time extension requests is in Grants Portal, you're able to create tiles. And with the tiles, you will be able to track activity completion deadlines. This will make it easier for you to see when the deadlines are coming up. If you need to talk to your program delivery manager, if you need to talk to any leadership regarding making any time extension requests. Also, you'll have weekly meetings with your program delivery manager. These are a great time for you to discuss the need for any possible time extension requests. You can also reach out to your regional FEMA POC or your recipient's POCs. Make sure the time extension requests and any approval letters are uploaded and the activity deadline request has been requested in Grants Portal. Make sure you keep the communication open early and often. Make sure we're having these conversations. If you know that a project is going to need a time extension request, make sure you're bringing this up to your program delivery manager in these weekly meetings and you're saying, hey, listen, this project is going to require a time extension request. So make sure that we're having these conversations early and often. We want to make sure that we're doing the time extension request prior to the activity completion deadline. The time extension request must outline the extenuating circumstances. So you want to make sure that you're putting in there a detailed letter, you're putting in any additional supporting documentation and information, and you're outlining what the extenuating circumstances is and why you need more time to complete the work on the project, and what is the new requested project completion deadline. It is also recommended to also provide any previous time extension requests. If you have any previous time extension requests, what you'll do in there is you'll specify what work has been completed since the last time extension request, what is your new completion deadline, and also in Grants Portal, add comments. The more details there are, the easier it is for the reviewers to understand what's happening in the project.
Here is some basic Grants Portal and Grants Manager system functionality. I'm going to go into the Grants Portal, Grants Manager training site to demo the following actions: how to save a filtered list and add a tile to your dashboard, how an applicant can request an activity completion deadline. If the request is within the recipient authority, we have some screenshots to show you what that will look like. And then we'll go into Grants Manager and show the approval process as well as the determination memo process. I will be going over how a recipient can request a bulk project extension request and that approval process in Grants Manager. And also in this presentation, we have screenshots of step-by-step processes for you to reference or to use as a job aid. So let's go over the process. These are the system processes within Grants Manager and Grants Portal. The applicant will request an activity completion deadline extension request in Grants Portal. If the recipient approves within their period of authority, the activity completion deadline automatically updates. Grants Manager process steps for FEMA approval. That process is initially set up in the event settings at the beginning of the event. The extension request responsibility will default to the region for their review. The event settings can be managed to set up the responsibility to either the joint field office, which would send it to the field review. So two different ways, either setting it up by region for the regional closeout to review, which is the default, or you can set it up by having the responsibility in the review process go to the joint field office. If it goes to the region, it goes to pending FEMA initial review step in Grants Manager. The closeout lead can then facilitate the whole process and may optionally assign a closeout specialist. The closeout lead can take action on behalf of the PA branch chief for the FEMA approval letter. Pending FEMA supervisory review in Grants Manager directs it towards the regional closeout lead. Then it will move on to pending leadership approval, which goes to the regional PA branch chief, and then that regional PA branch chief either approves or rejects that time extension request in Grants Manager. If it goes to the joint field office, it will start at pending FEMA initial review step, but it will be routed to the PA leadership to assign a PDMG to review, a program delivery manager. FEMA leadership assigns initial reviewer in Grants Manager, and that will initiate the process step PDMG review. Pending FEMA supervisory review in Grants Manager will send it to the Program Delivery Manager Task Force Lead to review. And pending leadership approval will go to the Infrastructure Branch Director or PA Group Supervisor or Deputy PA Group Supervisor. They will then take action to approve or reject that time extension request. So now I'm going to go in and show some of that functionality within Grants Portal. Here is our Grants Portal. This is our fake training site. So all the information in here is made up. And for this, I'm going to go in and show some filters and tiles of how you can track that activity completion deadline. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my applicant account, the city of Whitman. Now we can go over to our navigation pane and scroll all the way down to projects. And then we're going to want to open up our filters drop down. And you will see here the filter option for activity completion deadline. When you click on this, there's a few different options. You can filter all of the activity completion deadlines, due in the next 30 days, due in the next 60 days, due in the next 90 days, or deadline expired. So let's go ahead and just say deadline expired. Come up here and run that query. And we'll go down here. We'll see there's projects here. So let's save this filtered list. These are ones that we're going to want to take action on as soon as possible. We want to make sure that we get these extensions in because the deadline has already passed. So I'm going to save this filtered list. And I'm going to use the acronym Activity Completion Deadline Expired. This is going to save this. If I included any show hide columns or a quick search, I could click those two options. Then I'm going to click Save. And now I see here that my filter has changed. I have ACD expired. And now I can click this star to add the filter to my dashboard. Put it on my main dashboard. Then we can go to Dashboard. And you'll see here, here's our shortcut. I have 2 projects that are expired. Now, if you wanted to get ahead of the game, you could set up filters for each and every one of these options so that you know when it's due in the next 90 days, you can filter that. And even if there's nothing here today, that doesn't mean that next week, maybe the deadline is approaching within that 90-day time frame. This is a good tile to add as a reminder to start looking at the project to see if it can be completed within the next 90 days, or if the applicant should start having those conversations with the recipient POC and the FEMA POC to see if maybe a time extension request is needed. You can start that process. So here is in the next 30 days. And I'll run that query. And then I will save this filtered list. Again, add any columns or quick search if you selected any other than the default. My changes were saved. And I'm going to click this tile. Add that to my dashboard. And anytime you add a tile, it always places the tile or widget at the bottom to the left. All right, so that is our tiles, how to track that activity completion deadline by saving those filtered lists and then adding the tile. So now if I wanted to go as an applicant, the city of Whitman, and request activity completion deadline extension request, I would go to the projects, my navigation pane. Up here, you can always reset your filters. And I'm just going to go down here and go into this project. Now you'll see the general information, and listed under the general information is that activity completion deadline. Currently, it is June 28th, 2023. You can click the icon on this to show that the original activity completion deadline was November 28th, 2019. If there has been previous time extensions, you can view that history. You'll see there's already been a time extension request submitted. Shows the reason, the process step, the status is that it was approved, who it was requested by, and what day it was requested on. You can drill into that previous request, find the information, the requested project, documents, process status history. This goes through and shows you those process steps that I just covered. Go back to our project. So now we can go to request extension. So you'll see here when I select a date that is too far in advance, it is past the event period of performance that was discussed earlier. This request for a project extension cannot go past that initial period of performance, the event period of performance. And it gives you that event deadline, 5/27/2028. And it also gives you the error message that lets you know that your requested deadline lies outside of the event period of performance. If additional time is needed, please contact the recipient or request an extension within that event completion deadline. So we'll go ahead and put, there we go. And now that error message is gone because it is before that 2028 date. You can add your reason in here, and you're also going to want to make sure that that request is written and uploaded at the project level. Here is the basic reason. If you'd like to add more, you can. You can little area to expand the text box and submit that request. Now you will see that it is pending FEMA initial review. Shows the reason. Down to the requested project to go back into that project. If there is any additional documents that get uploaded, this is where they will be. There's process status history, and it's at FEMA pending initial review. So now I'm going to go and show you the recipient review, what that looks like. This is a screenshot of the recipient review for the activity completion deadline extension request we just submitted in Grants Portal. The recipient can approve, reject, or edit the extension request. The reasons for editing may be that after further discussion with the applicant, the date needs to be revised, maybe less time, maybe more time, versus rejecting the entire activity completion deadline. We'll send it back to the applicant. They would restart the whole process over again. It just stops that whole process. So those are some of the options the recipient can do. If they edit the request, they would put in the new time that they would like to edit, and then they will need to provide the reason that they are editing it and provide justification, whether that be an email or documentation, making sure that the person with the authority to edit the extension request is doing it on behalf of the applicant's request. If the recipient approves the request, they get the approve button, they click that, they can add a comment, and then it will show the activity completion deadline extension request process has been completed. Now, if it is FEMA's authority, we go into Grants Manager and show you that process. Here we are in Grants Manager. We go in and find that project, go to Grants Manager, go to Projects, 54880, search. Here is that project. And under activity completion deadline, you can see that there is a little orange-yellow triangle. You hover over that, it will give you a message, and it just lets you know that there is a pending extension request. The requested activity completion deadline extension is May 30th, 2024. To view that request, click the View Extension Request. And it also states the reason. On the FEMA side, you can also go and view the history. You'll see the one that was completed and the new one that we just created that's pending FEMA initial review step. So let's go view that extension request. And here are the options that FEMA has. They can approve, reject, assign an initial reviewer, which would be their PDMG would be the initial reviewer if it's at the field, or it would be the closeout lead if it was defaulting to the region. There's options here. FEMA can edit the request. Of course, if you're editing the request on behalf of either the applicant or the recipient, you want to make sure that there's written justification requesting that edit be made. FEMA can cancel the request or put the request on hold. Maybe they need a little bit more justification, or they're waiting on some documentation or some supporting correspondence to support the need for the extension request. We could just put it on hold. Now, if we reject it, this is what's going to start that determination memo process. This process will be irreversible. If we did want to deny this extension request, we click reject and identify an eligibility issue. Now, this determination memo is only for the time extension request. It is not for the whole project. Even though it's a complete determination on the eligibility issue, it is just for the time extension request. And the 4 determination memo categories that are listed for this time extension request are a late submission of the request. If FEMA submitted an RFI, a request for information, and there was no response within that designated time frame. If the time extension request was not submitted within reasonable time, or an eligibility issue with the work completed. So those are the options. I'm not going to do that in this case. Just showing. FEMA would put in the cost being denied, whatever eligibility issue there is, and then the law, regulation, and policy that it is referencing. So I'll go ahead and cancel that. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you that approval process in Grants Manager. So when I click approve, this lets me know that I'm going to be sending it to pending FEMA supervisory review, which goes to the regional closeout lead, because in event settings for this demo event, it is defaulted to region for review. Click approve. Now you'll see that activity completion deadline request is pending FEMA supervisory review. It's also got the process step listed in general information. Now, if I went back to this activity completion deadline request in Grants portal and I refresh my page, you'll see that it also has the process step pending FEMA supervisory review. And if I wanted to find out more information on these process steps of who was doing what, I could come down here to that process status history and see who was taking action. So I'll go back to Grants Manager. Now that it is pending FEMA supervisory review, they could send it back or reject or approve. We're going to go ahead and approve. This is going to send it to the regional PA branch chief. And now pending FEMA leadership approval. Approve. Are you sure you want to approve this activity completion deadline request? Approve. And now it shows the process step is process complete. If your event has not been migrated over from EMMIE before the EMMIE decommission, there would be one last step to click that button, confirm update in EMMIE. If the event is new from January 15, 2024, that button will no longer be needed because all events are fully in Grants Manager and Grants Portal, and EMMIE will not need to be updated. So now I can take you back to Grants Portal, and I'm going to show you as a recipient, I'm going to go in as the state of Montana, how the recipient would request a time extension request for one of the recipient's projects. Go into projects, find the project that you would like to look up to request that extension. And you can request a project extension anytime throughout the process. Here's the request extension, and then I could select the date that I wanted, add my reason, and submit that request. If the recipient wanted to submit a time extension request on behalf of their applicants, they would go down to sub-recipient organizations, go down to projects, and then you could choose whichever project. So they're on their subrecipient project. Again, if the applicant is asking the recipient to submit the request on behalf of them, making sure that that supporting documentation is uploaded at the project level, and then go in and request that extension date, add your reason, and submit. And then it goes to pending FEMA initial review. So that's how a recipient would submit on behalf of their applicant. Now, the recipient can also request an event period of performance extension. So let's go back up into that organization for the recipient. We'll go into events and we will find an event. Now here you'll see at the top, it says event details. So we're at the event level versus where we were just at the project level. At this event level, you'll also see what looks very similar. Activity completion deadline, September 22nd, 2025. Again, you can view that request history. There's been a couple of extension requests. Gives the reason, process step, who requested it and when. So we can request that extension, add the reason, making sure that it has all those extenuating circumstances proven to be beyond the applicant and recipient's control. Submit that request. And now it goes to pending FEMA initial review step, and it will go through that whole process that I just showed you in Grants Manager. The applicant can also review under the events page. Go back to our event details page. You can always tile it if you'd like to your dashboard. But if you come down, you will see a tab for project activity completion deadlines. And you can see all the previous extension requests, when they were done, who did them, what is the status of those extension requests, what process step is it, the basic reasoning, and then the number of projects that have been requested. You can drill into each of those extension requests. The recipient can also submit a bulk request for project extensions. It doesn't happen a lot, but once in a while in catastrophic events, there is a need to do so. The recipient would click bulk request for project extensions, clicking on the request for the extension, adding the reason. You'll see you can't submit yet because you still have to assign the selected projects that you want to be associated with this bulk request. You can select all. You can use your filters to select by applicant. You can select by category of work. You'll notice the recipient can request bulk project extension request for emergency work. You can filter by activity completion deadline, or if they are on another pending request, on this current request, or not on any other requests. You can add show hide columns if you'd like to add the applicant type, or if the project has a policy issue or a version. You can save those. Go down here and you see there's 300 entries. So I'm going to go ahead and filter by category of work. And I'm going to select, I'll go ahead and select these 5 projects. Now you'll see it says submit request, but if you keep scrolling down, you'll notice here you can upload a document. Upload, pick the document that you want. And now that document is uploaded, I want to make sure that that file name, description, and category are correct. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. Now I will follow my disaster-specific naming convention. So maybe if it was for a specific applicant, you could put the applicant name. You can use this category filter to slim down what the category options are. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it all. It's already got applicant recipient request, and I'm going to go ahead and save. Now all that information is correct. Upload that pending document. See it listed here, and I can submit my request. It gives me an overview of all the projects that I've selected, any documents that I've uploaded, and my one last final step to submit that request. And now it's pending FEMA initial review for this event. So let's see if I go into this event in Grants Manager. So now I'm in Grants Manager. Let's go find that event. It's already listed here. scroll down to the project activity completion deadline, and you'll see this top one is the newest request. Click that. And here I am in that event activity completion extension request with the same options as the project extension request: edit, cancel, or hold. Rejecting will start that determination memo process, or they can approve. And then they approve from the FEMA supervisory review, leadership approval to the regional PA branch chief. FEMA leadership approval, approve, and approve. So that is how the recipient will submit both project request and the approval process in Grants Manager. In Grants Manager, if the recipient wanted FEMA to submit an extension request on behalf of the recipient, they could also do so. So back at the event details page, you can go down to the activity completion deadline. You'll see the various requests for the event. View that extension request, approve, approve, approve. There we go. Now we go back to the event, and it has the new date. Now for some closing slides. Here are some resources. Today we discussed the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, also known as our PAPA G. Please remember to use the version that was in place at the time the event was declared. There's the Code of Federal Regulations website. If you have any policy-specific questions, you can contact FEMA's headquarters policy branch at the email listed here. Don't forget to check out the Grants Portal Support Center. You can find additional job aids and fact sheets, as well as a copy of this presentation. And if any of our state, local, tribe, or territory partners would like to request additional training, please coordinate with your regional offices. Regional offices can request training from the Learning and Development Branch by sending an email listed here, and please identify your organization that you are associated with in your email. If you're not familiar with the Grants Portal Grants Manager YouTube channel, here are some basic videos that you can check out. It has basic navigation, dashboards, widgets, and tiles. If you can't remember how to make that activity completion deadline tile, you can go and review those videos. We also have our recipient and subrecipient Grants Portal user manuals. We are constantly adding additional videos here, so feel free to check back regularly for updated trainings. And we also are going to be working on our Grants Portal user manuals, so check out the support center for those updates coming later this year.